My name is Jasmine, and I am 32 years old. I built a career as a high-end interior architect designing spaces for the wealthiest people in Atlanta. I thought I had created a sanctuary for myself, a place where my chaotic family could not touch me. I was wrong. Last Tuesday, I came home early from a business trip to find my apartment destroyed. My brother was wearing his muddy boots on my white Italian sofa. My sister-in-law was wearing my silk clothes, and my mother was frying grease in my minimalist kitchen. They told me I was selfish for wanting them to leave. They told me family shares everything. 2 days later, they broke in again while I was at work. That was the moment I stopped crying and started plotting. They didn't know that while they were arguing over who got to sleep in my master bedroom, I was already signing the deed on a new house inside a gated community they could never access. And I didn't just move. I bought the debt on their house too. Before I tell you how I evicted my own parents, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to save yourself. I stepped off the elevator of my penthouse building in downtown Atlanta. My sanctuary, or it was supposed to be. The door was cracked open. Panic hit me first. Burglars. I pushed the door open, ready to call the police, but it was not thieves. It was worse. The smell hit me before the sight. Heavy grease. Burnt onions. It clung to my walls and suffocated the scent of my expensive fig candles. I walked into the living room and froze. My brother Terrence was sprawled across my custom white Italian leather sofa. He was 35 years old, but acting like a teenager. His muddy construction boots were resting directly on the white leather cushions I had imported from Milan. He did not even look up from his phone. Then I saw her, Becky, my sister-in-law. She was parading around my living room, wearing my vintage emerald silk kimono, the one I bought in Kyoto. She held a glass of my best red wine dangerously close to the fabric. She swirled it, giggling at something on the television. The television I specifically kept off to maintain a peaceful environment was now blasting a reality show at full volume. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage, not fear. Becky jumped and a splash of dark red wine landed right on the silk lapel. She gasped but did not apologize. She just looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes she used to manipulate everyone. "Oh, Jasmine, you scared me. We did not expect you back until Tuesday." Before I could scream, my mother walked out of my pristine minimalist kitchen. She was wearing my white architectural drafting apron, the one I used for client presentations. It was now covered in flour and grease. She was wiping her hands on it. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Bernice said. "No hello. No hug. Just accusation. We were hungry, Jasmine. Your fridge was full of nothing but rabbit food and fancy water, so I had to improvise. I am frying chicken. You should be grateful I am cooking for you instead of making that face." "This is my house," I said, dropping my suitcase. "You broke in." "We did not break in," Terrence said lazily, picking at his teeth. "Mom has a key, remember. Family does not break in, Jasmine. We visit. Besides, Becky is pregnant. She needs to relax. Your apartment has the best air conditioning in the city. You are never here anyway. Why are you being so selfish?" I marched over to the coffee table to turn off the television, but stopped dead. My father Luther was sitting at my dining table, my workspace. He had pushed aside my laptop and spread out his lottery tickets and racing forms. But that was not the worst part. He was using a thick black permanent marker to circle numbers. And underneath his gambling papers was my latest project, the blueprints for a $3 million renovation I was presenting tomorrow. The marker had bled through. There were black ink spots all over the elevation drawings. "Dad, stop!" I yelled, lunging for the papers. "Those are client documents." Luther looked up slowly, his eyes narrowing. He did not move the marker. He just stared at me with that familiar disappointment. The look that said, I would never be enough because I was not a son. "Do not you raise your voice at me, girl," he barked. "I am your father. I put a roof over your head for 18 years. Now you make a little money, And you think you can scream at us over some paper drawings. It is not just paper, I said, my hands shaking as I pulled the ruined blueprints away. This is my career. This is how I pay for this apartment you are currently destroying. Oh, here we go. Terrence groaned from the sofa. The high and mighty Jasmine, always throwing her money in our faces. You think you are better than us just because you went to college and live in a high-rise. You forgot where you came from. You forgot you are Black Jasmine. You think acting like them will save you. He pointed at Becky, who was now sobbing loudly. Look what you did! Jasmine, Becky wailed, clutching her stomach. You are stressing the baby. You know I have high blood pressure. You just hate me because I am white and poor. You want me to suffer. The room instantly turned against me. It was the dynamic I knew too well. The pile-on. Bernice rushed to Becky, fanning her with a magazine. Look at you! Bernice spat at me, making a pregnant woman cry over a wine stain. It is just a robe, Jasmine. Material things. The Lord says do not store up treasures on earth, but you worship your things more than your own blood. We just wanted a family dinner. A nice evening. But you have to ruin it with your attitude. Get out, I whispered. Get out of my house. Now. Or I am calling the police. Luther stood up, knocking his chair over. You would call the cops on your own father, on your brother, after everything we sacrificed for you. You ungrateful child. Fine, we are leaving, but do not expect us to bless this mess you call a life. They shuffled out, leaving trash and chaos in their wake. As the door slammed shut, my phone buzzed with a text from Terrence. Do not be stingy. Me and Becky are getting evicted. Mom and Dad promised we could move into your place this weekend. Get the guest room ready. I stared at the message and realized this was not a visit. It was an invasion, and I had to end it. I stood by the front door, arms crossed, waiting for them to leave. The air still smelled like burnt grease and cheap perfume. Before you go, Mom, I said, holding out my hand. I need my key back. The one I gave you for emergencies. The one you used to water my plants when I was in London. Bernice paused halfway out the door. She clutched her purse to her chest like I was trying to rob her. You want the key back? She asked, her voice dripping with offense. You really do not trust your own mother, do you? This is what money does to people, Jasmine. It makes them paranoid. It makes them treat their flesh and blood like criminals. I am not being paranoid, I said, keeping my voice level despite the pounding in my temples. You just proved you cannot respect boundaries. You brought 5 people into my home without asking. You ruined my work. Give me the key. She huffed, rolling her eyes at Luther, who was shaking his head in disgust. Fine, she said, digging around in her oversized bag. Here. She slapped a single silver key into my palm. I looked at it. Then I looked at the keychain hanging from her bag. There was another one just like it. And I saw something else. Terrence was spinning a keyring on his finger by the elevator. Becky had a shiny new key on a pink lanyard around her neck. My stomach dropped. Mom, I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. How many keys did you make? Bernice shrugged, adjusting her hat. Well, it just made sense, Jasmine. Terrence needs a set for when he wants to come watch the game on your big screen. His TV is broken. And Becky needs one for her naps. The baby needs peace and quiet, and your guest room mattress is the best. And I gave a set to Aunt Sally. I felt the blood drain from my face. Aunt Sally. Our old neighbor from the projects. She is not even related to us, Mom. Why does Aunt Sally have a key to my penthouse? Bernice waved her hand dismissively. Oh, stop it. Sally is practically family. Her water got cut off last week. She just comes over to use your steam shower and do a little laundry. It is a sin to have all these amenities and not share them with the less fortunate. God blessed you so you could bless others, Jasmine, not hoard it all like a dragon. I stared at them, my mouth open. My home was not a home. It was a community center. A public hotel for anyone my mother felt sorry for or wanted to impress. Strangers were sleeping in my sheets, using my soap, walking on my floors when I was working hard to pay the mortgage. I realized then that changing the locks would not be enough. They felt entitled to my space. They believed my success was their property. If I changed the locks, they would just break a window, or guilt the doorman, or call the locksmith again. I looked at the single key in my hand and then at the keys dangling from their pockets. "Keep it," I said coldly, closing my fist around the metal. "Keep them all. It does not matter anymore." Bernice smiled, thinking she had won. "See," she said, patting my cheek with her rough hand. "I knew you would see reason. We are family, baby. What is yours is ours." She did not know that was the last time she would ever step foot in this apartment. She did not know that the key she fought so hard to keep was about to become the most useless piece of metal in Atlanta. Because I was done sharing. I was done being the family doormat. I walked into my bedroom, my hands trembling. It was worse than I thought. My closet door was wide open. Clothes were pulled off hangers and scattered on the floor like a tornado had hit. I picked up the emerald silk kimono Becky had been wearing. It was ruined. The dark wine stain on the lapel was bad enough, but then I saw the side seam. It was ripped completely open. The delicate fabric had been stretched beyond its limit when Becky tried to force her pregnant belly into it. This was not just a piece of clothing. It was a vintage piece I found in a small shop in Kyoto. Irreplaceable. I walked back out to the living room holding the torn silk. Then I saw the wine bottle on the coffee table. It was empty. My heart sank. That was a 1982 Bordeaux, a gift from my biggest client after we finished the St. Regis project. I had been saving it for a special occasion, for a promotion, for a wedding, not for my brother to guzzle down while watching daytime TV. I went to the kitchen. The smell of burnt grease was overpowering. My refrigerator was a disaster. Tupperware containers of old soul food were stacked haphazardly, leaking gravy onto the glass shelves. A half-eaten drumstick sat directly on the counter next to my espresso machine. I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. I started writing. Silk kimono, $500. Vintage Bordeaux, $800. Professional cleaning fee, $200. I marched back into the living room and shoved the paper into Terrence's chest. "You owe me $1,500, I said, my voice cold and hard. "And that does not even cover the emotional distress." Terrence looked at the paper and laughed. A loud barking laugh that made my skin crawl. "You are joking, right?" he said, crumpling the paper and tossing it onto the floor. "You are charging your own family. We are blood, Jasmine. People do not send invoices to their brother. Besides, look at this place." He gestured around my penthouse. "You are rich. You make more in a week than I make in a year. What is a few dresses and a bottle of wine to you? You are just being petty." Bernice chimed in from the kitchen, wiping her greasy hands on her skirt. "He is right, Jasmine. God gave you abundance so you could share. Do not be a miser. It is ugly. You care more about your fancy things than you do about your brother having a good time. We were celebrating family, and you just want to talk about money. Money is the root of all evil, baby, and you have got a lot of it." They started gathering their things, but they did not clean up. They left the chicken bones on the counter. They left the wine glass with the red ring on my white table. They left the muddy boot prints on the rug. As they walked out the door, Terrence turned back with a smirk. "Do not worry about the mess," he said. "We will be back this weekend. Dad wants to have a barbecue on your balcony. He says you have the best view for the fireworks, so keep the fridge stocked, sis. We will bring the appetite." The door slammed shut, leaving me standing in the wreckage of my life. I looked at the torn kimono in my hands and the crumpled bill on the floor. They were not just disrespectful. They were dangerous, and if I did not stop them now, there would be nothing left of me to save. I spent the next 2 hours on my hands and knees scrubbing. The white leather sofa was a lost cause. The mud from Terrence's boots had seeped into the grain of the hide, destroying the finish. Every time I scrubbed, I felt like I was trying to erase them from my life, but the stain just went deeper. I threw the ruined silk kimono in the trash. It hurt to do it. That robe cost more than my first car, but looking at it just made my stomach turn. I tied up the garbage bag full of their half-eaten food and empty bottles and dragged it to the chute. The apartment was quiet again, but it did not feel empty. It felt violated. The air still held the faint scent of burnt grease masking my expensive fig candles. My phone buzzed on the marble island. The sound echoed in the silent kitchen like a gunshot. I knew who it was before I looked. It was Terrence. I wiped my wet hands on a towel and picked up the phone. The screen lit up my face in the dark kitchen. It was a long text. A wall of words. I started reading, and my breath hitched in my throat. Yo, Jaz. Do not be mad about the mess earlier. You know how Mom gets, she just wanted to feed us. Anyway, bad news. The landlord is tripping. He is kicking us out on the first. Says he is selling the place, but I think he just hates seeing a black man succeed. Whatever. We talked to Mom and Dad about it on the ride home. They said it is cool if we crash with you for a bit, just until the baby comes and we get back on our feet. Probably like a year max. I had to read that line twice. A year. They wanted to live in my penthouse for a year. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I kept reading. Mom said your home office is huge and you never use it for anything but drawing pictures anyway. So we are gonna take that room. It has the best light for Becky. You might want to clear out those big tables and all that paper by Saturday. We need space for the crib and all our stuff. Also, Becky needs quiet for her stress, so maybe you can work from a coffee shop or something during the day. We will bring the truck around noon. Later, sis. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the counter. I stood there in the dark, feeling the blood pound in my ears. They had held a family meeting without me. They had discussed my home, my sanctuary, as if it were a piece of community property. My father, who claimed to be the head of the household, had volunteered my apartment to solve a problem he could not fix. My mother, who judged my lifestyle, had promised my workspace to her favorite child. They were not asking for a favor. They were announcing a takeover. They wanted me to dismantle my architecture firm, my drafting tables, my livelihood so Terrence could play video games and Becky could nap. They wanted to displace me in my own home. They called it crashing. I called it an invasion. I looked at the spot where Luther had ruined my blueprints. I looked at the stained sofa. This was just the preview. If they moved in on Saturday, they would never leave. They would bleed me dry until I was just a guest in my own house paying the bills for their comfort. I realized then that locking the door would not work. Calling the police would not work. They felt entitled to my life. As long as I was here, they would keep coming. They would keep breaking in. They would keep taking. I looked around the apartment I had worked so hard to buy. I loved this place, but I loved my peace more. And if I stayed here, I would lose both. I knew what I had to do. It was extreme. It was cold, but it was the only way to survive. I was not going to clear out my office for them. I was going to clear out everything. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother. My hand was shaking not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. Bernice answered on the second ring. I could hear the television blasting in the background and the sizzle of frying oil. Before I could speak, she cut me off. I know you saw the text, Jasmine, she said, her voice heavy with that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. Do not start with the drama. We are doing this for family. Mom, I said, gripping the marble edge of my kitchen island. You cannot move Terrence and Becky into my apartment. This is a one-bedroom unit. I work from home. I have client meetings here. There is no room. And I did not agree to this. Bernice let out a long sigh, the kind that said I was exhausting her with my selfishness. Jasmine, listen to me. You are looking at this all wrong. You made it out, baby. You got the degrees. You got the fancy job. You are living the dream we never got to touch. But you did not get there by yourself. You stand on our shoulders. It is your duty to reach back and pull your brother up. That is what we do. Black families stick together. We survive together. Or have you been around those white folks so long, You forgot who you are. I felt the familiar weight of the guilt trip settling on my shoulders. The black tax. The unwritten rule that says my success belongs to everyone who shares my last name. But Mom, I argued, trying one last time to use logic. Terrence is 35. He is able-bodied. He can work. Why is it my job to house him and his wife? Because he is a man, Bernice snapped, her voice turning hard. And a man needs dignity, Jasmine. He is down on his luck right now. The system is rigged against him, you know that. If you put him on the street, you are taking away his pride. You want to see your own brother homeless while you sip wine in the sky. What kind of sister does that? What kind of black woman does that? I looked over at my desk. The pile of mail from earlier was still sitting there. Right on top was a letter from the building management company. It was a notice regarding my lease renewal. I stared at the date. My lease expired in 3 days. I had been planning to renew it month to month while I looked for a house, but I had not signed anything yet. I looked at the date again. Sunday. The exact day Terrence said they were bringing the truck. The realization hit me like a splash of ice water. I did not have to fight them. I did not have to get a restraining order or call the police or scream until my throat bled. They wanted the apartment. They felt entitled to the walls and the view and the address. Fine. They could have it. All of it. I took a deep breath and let the anger drain out of me, leaving behind a calm clarity. You are right, Mom. I said, my voice steady and soft. I have been selfish. Family comes first. Bernice made a triumphant noise in her throat. Praise God. I knew you still had a heart in there somewhere, girl. So it is settled. They will be there Sunday at noon. Make sure that room is cleared out. Oh, I will, I said, a smile spreading across my face that she could not see. I will make sure everything is ready. I hung up the phone and looked around my beautiful apartment. I loved this place, but it was just a shell. The real value was my peace, and I was about to buy it back. I was not going to kick them out. I was going to let them move in, and I was going to be gone before they even put the key in the door. I called a locksmith the morning after the first invasion. I paid extra for the highest security smart lock on the market. It had a camera, a fingerprint scanner, and a keypad. I thought it would buy me 3 days of peace until Sunday. I was wrong. It did not even last 24 hours. I was sitting in a conference room with the partners of my firm. We were finalizing the details on the new Symphony Hall project. It was the biggest contract of my career. My phone was face down on the table, but my watch buzzed against my wrist. Movement detected at front door. Then another buzz. Doorbell ring. Then another. I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on the acoustic specs on the screen. But then the buzzing stopped and a notification flashed. Tampering detected. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. I opened the app on my phone and the live feed froze my blood. My father, Luther, was standing in the hallway of my building. He was wearing his Sunday suit and sweating. He was arguing with a man in blue coveralls holding a drill, a locksmith. I turned up the volume on my phone. Look, man, Luther was shouting, waving his hands. I told you, my daughter is on a plane to Paris. She called me crying, saying she lost her phone and her keys. She needs me to get in there to feed her cat. She does not have a cat. I have never been to Paris, too. And I was definitely not crying. The locksmith looked skeptical. He hesitated, holding the drill. Sir, I really need to see some ID or proof of residence. This is a high-security building. Luther puffed out his chest. I am Luther Vance. My daughter is Jasmine Vance. Look at my ID. Same last name. You think I am trying to rob my own child? I am trying to help her. You want her cat to starve. You want me to call your manager and tell him you let an animal die because of red tape. The locksmith sighed. He was young. He looked tired. He did not get paid enough to fight with an angry old man in a suit. Fine, he said. But I have to log it. Just open the damn door, Luther snapped. I watched in horror as the drill whined. Metal crunched against metal. My $3,000 smart lock sparked and gave way. The door swung open. Luther did not even thank the man. He just waved his hand, signaling to someone out of the frame. "Come on in, Bernice," he yelled. "It is open." My mother waddled into the frame, dragging two massive suitcases. Behind her came Terence and Becky. They were not waiting for Sunday. They were moving in now, today, Thursday. I watched them swarm into my sanctuary like locusts. Bernice immediately started pointing fingers, directing traffic. "Put the big boxes in the office," she commanded. "Move that drafting table to the storage unit. We need room for the recliner." Terence dropped a heavy box right in the middle of my foyer, scratching the hardwood floor I had just refinished. He walked over to my wall-mounted television and started unplugging my HDMI cables. Becky went straight for the kitchen, opening my cabinets and sweeping my expensive organic spices into a trash bag to make room for her boxes of instant mac and cheese. They were erasing me. Before I had even left, they were actively deleting my presence from my own home. I stood in the hallway of my office, staring at the tiny screen, unable to breathe. They had lied. The Sunday agreement was just a distraction. They never intended to wait. They intended to conquer. I wanted to run home. I wanted to scream, but I could not. If I went there now, I would end up in jail for what I might do. I watched my father kick my favorite ottoman out of the way to make room for his muddy shoes. I took a screenshot. Evidence. Then I closed the app. I walked back into the meeting room and sat down. My hands were steady, but my heart was cold stone. Let them move the furniture, I thought. Let them get comfortable. It would only make the fall hurt more. I drove 80 miles an hour all the way home, leaving my car in the loading zone and running for the elevator. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from exertion, but from pure panic. When I burst through the door, the lock was hanging off the frame, just like I saw on the camera. I ran straight to my office. The door was wide open, and the air was thick with the smell of corn chips and cheap body spray. Terence was sitting in my Herman Miller chair, leaning back so far the springs groaned. He had his muddy boots up on my desk, right next to my dual monitors. He was mashing keys on my mechanical keyboard, playing some shooter game he had downloaded onto my workstation. "Yo, Jas," he said without looking away from the screen. "This computer is a beast. Graphics are insane. Do not worry, I made a new profile, so I did not mess up your work stuff much." I did not answer him because I was staring at the corner of the room. My drafting table was gone. In its place was a beat-up wooden crib with peeling yellow paint. And next to it were 3 black garbage bags stuffed to bursting. I saw a jagged piece of white plastic poking out of the plastic. It looked like a miniature staircase. I ran to the bags and ripped one open. My breath left my body. Inside were the shattered remains of the Symphony Hall model. The 3D printed acoustics panels, the hand-painted figures, the tiny LED lighting system I had spent weeks soldering. It was all crushed. Broken. Garbage. "What did you do?" I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and ugly. "These are not trash. These are architectural models. These are worth thousands of dollars." Bernice walked in, wiping dust off her hands. She looked at the bag and shrugged. "Oh, those little doll houses. They were taking up too much space, Jasmine. The baby needs room for the crib. You can always glue them back together if they are so important. Besides, you are a grown woman. Why are you playing with toys? You threw away my career," I yelled, stepping toward her. I was shaking violently. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to make her understand the value of what she had destroyed. Suddenly, a heavy hand grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. It was Luther. His face was twisted in a snarl I had not seen since I was 16. Before I could blink, his hand flew up. He did not hit me, but the wind of his open palm brushed my cheek. He stopped just inches from my face, trembling with the effort to hold back. "Do not you dare," he hissed, spitting the words into my face. "Do not you dare raise your voice at your mother." "Over what? Some plastic toys? Some glue and cardboard? You are going to disrespect the woman who gave you life because she moved your little art projects. You are sick, Jasmine. Your priorities are twisted. Apologize. Now." I looked at him. I looked at his raised hand. I looked at Terence smirking behind the monitor. I looked at Bernice crossing her arms in self-righteous victory. And something inside me just clicked off. The anger, the hurt, the desperate need for them to understand me, it all just vanished. It was replaced by a cold gray silence. I realized then that they would never respect me. They were incapable of it. To them, I was not an architect. I was just an ATM with an attitude. Fighting them gave them power, it gave them fuel. So I stopped feeding the fire. I took a deep breath and let my shoulders drop. I smoothed my expression into a blank mask. No emotion, no reaction, just a gray rock. You are right, Dad, I said, my voice flat and monotone. I am sorry, Mom. It was just a model. I can print another one. The baby is more important. Luther lowered his hand slowly, looking suspicious. Bernice huffed, adjusting her blouse. Well, at least you have some sense left. Now go help your brother figure out the Wi-Fi password. The game is lagging. I nodded. Okay, I said. I will handle it. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving the shattered pieces of my hard work in the trash. I did not look back. I did not cry. I just started counting down the hours until I could burn this whole life to the ground. I walked back into the living room. My face felt like a mask made of porcelain, cold and hard and ready to crack. But I forced the corners of my mouth up. I softened my eyes. I channeled every ounce of professional composure I used when dealing with difficult clients who wanted to put a hot tub in a historic library. I looked at Luther, who was still puffing his chest out like a rooster who had just won a fight. I looked at Bernice, who was picking at her nails, waiting for me to grovel. I am sorry, I said. My voice was steady. It was smooth. It sounded like submission, but it tasted like bile. I really am. I have been so focused on my career that I forgot what really matters. You guys are right. Family is everything. And Terence needs this. The baby needs this. I was being selfish, trying to keep all this space to myself. The silence in the room was heavy. They looked at each other confused. They were ready for a fight. They were ready for me to scream or cry or call the police. They did not know what to do with surrender. Then slowly a grin spread across Terrence's face. See, he said, pointing a greasy finger at me. I told you she would come around. She just needed a little reminder of who is boss. Bernice let out a breath she had been holding. Praise Jesus, she said. The devil had a hold on you for a minute there, Jasmine, but I prayed him away. I knew my daughter was in there. Luther grunted, sitting back down at the table and picking up his marker again. Good, he said. Now go make us some coffee. We have planning to do. I moved to the kitchen, but Becky stopped me. She waddled over, dragging her feet on my floor. She looked around the living room, squinting at my floor-to-ceiling windows. The ones draped in custom charcoal linen drapes that cost $200 a yard. If we are going to be living here, she said, her voice whiny and high-pitched, we need to make some changes. This place feels like a museum. It is cold. And those curtains? She pointed a manicured finger at my window treatments. They are too dark. They bring down my mood. I need pink, like a soft, dusty rose. It is better for the baby energy. You need to change them before we move in fully. And maybe paint this wall. White is so boring. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who was wearing my stolen clothes, demanding I redecorate my $1 million apartment to look like a nursery school. A week ago, I would have laughed in her face. Today, I just nodded. You are absolutely right, Becky, I said. Pink would be lovely. It would really warm up the space. Bernice clapped her hands. See, she wants to help. That is my girl. But I continued, raising my voice just enough to be heard over the TV. I cannot do it with everyone here. I need to move the heavy drafting tables. I need to hire painters. I need to order the curtains. It is going to be a mess. Dust everywhere. Fumes. It is not safe for the baby. I looked at Luther. Give me 1 week, I said. Just 1 week. Let me get everything perfect for you. I will move my office out. I will paint. I will get the pink curtains. Come back next Friday at 5. It will be ready, I promise. They exchanged glances. A week was a long time, but the promise of a custom renovated apartment was too good to pass up, Fine Terrence said. But do not think you can change the locks again. We will be checking in. I smiled, my coldest smile yet. Do not worry, I said. You will not need to check in. When you come back next Friday, you will not believe your eyes. I meant every word. They just did not know what I was really preparing. My family thought I was just a well-paid employee. They thought I punched a clock and answered to a white boss downtown. They had no idea who I really was. I was not just a senior designer. I was a named partner. My name was on the glass doors of the firm. Vance and Associates. That was how I could afford a penthouse. That was how I could afford to lose $1,500 in wine and silk without going bankrupt. But my job title was not the biggest secret I was keeping. My biggest secret was sitting in a fireproof safe in my office. 6 months ago, I closed on a property. It was not an investment flip. It was a forever home. A 6-bedroom sprawling estate in the Enclave. It is the most exclusive gated community in Georgia. We are talking 12-foot perimeter walls topped with sensors. Armed guards at the gate 24/7. Private security patrols that circle every hour. You need a background check just to get a landscaping permit there. You cannot just buzz someone in. You have to register them days in advance. The tragic irony was that I bought it for them. I bought it for Luther and Bernice. I wanted to move them out of their crumbling house in the old neighborhood. I wanted to give them a retirement sanctuary where they could host Sunday dinners in a proper dining room. I was going to surprise them at Christmas. I had the renovation plans drawn up. I was going to hand them the deed and say thank you for raising me. I was going to be the good daughter, the provider. But watching them destroy my apartment changed everything. Watching my father raise his hand to me over a plastic model. Watching my mother throw my hard work in the trash to make room for a crib. I realized the truth. If I gave them that house, they would not appreciate it. They would consume it. They would move Terrence and Becky in before the ink was dry. They would fill it with grease and noise and entitlement. They would turn my gift into their ghetto. Now the Enclave was not a gift. It was a fortress. It was my escape pod. I drove there after leaving the apartment. The guard at the main gate greeted me by name, Mr. Henderson. He was 6 feet 4 inches of muscle, and he carried a sidearm. "Good evening, Ms. Vance," he said, checking my license plate against his tablet. "We updated the security protocols you requested. No visitors without explicit written authorization." "Correct." "Correct," I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. "Absolutely no one, Mr. Henderson. Not even if they say they are my mother. Not even if they are crying. Not even if they say it is an emergency. If they are not on the list, they do not get past this gate." "Understood," he said. I drove through the silent, manicured streets to my driveway. I parked in my 4-car garage. The silence was heavy and beautiful. I pulled out the access card. It was not a flimsy metal key like the one my mother fought for. It was heavy black plastic with a gold chip encrypted and untraceable. This was not just a key, it was a wall, a barrier between me and the chaos. My family thought they had won a victory by taking over my 1-bedroom apartment. They were fighting over scraps. They did not know they had just lost a mansion. And as I walked into my empty, echoing foyer, I felt the first real smile in days creep onto my face. Let them have the pink curtains. I had a castle. I did not hire a normal moving company. I hired Midnight Movers. They are a discreet service usually used by celebrities or people running from abusive exes. They specialize in silent extractions. No logos on the trucks, no shouting. They wear soft-soled shoes and communicate with hand signals. I booked them for Friday morning, the day before the deadline. But I could not wait until Friday to start moving the important things. If my family decided to pop in early again, I would lose my jewelry, my passport, my hard drives. So I started Operation Ghost. Every morning I left the apartment carrying my oversized designer tote bag. To the doorman, it looked like I was going to the office. To my neighbors, it looked like another business trip. But inside that bag, I was smuggling my life out, piece by piece. Monday, I took my jewelry box. Not the whole box, just the contents wrapped in velvet pouches. My grandmother's pearls. The diamond studs I bought after my first big commission. The gold watch. I nested them between my laptop and my lunch. I felt like a thief in my own home. My heart raced every time the elevator stopped. What if Terrence was in the lobby? What if Bernice was waiting by the mailboxes? Tuesday, I took the documents, my birth certificate, my social security card, the deed to the new house, the partnership agreement for my firm. I scanned everything first, then shredded the originals I didn't need and packed the vital ones in a waterproof folder. I hid it under a stack of fabric swatches. If anyone asked, I was just bringing work home. Wednesday was the hard drives, my entire portfolio, 10 years of architectural designs, client data, and financial records. If Luther got his hands on these, he would probably try to pawn them or use them as coasters. I wrapped them in bubble wrap and put them in my gym bag. I walked out wearing yoga pants, carrying the digital soul of my career past the doorman, who smiled and told me to have a good workout. By Thursday night, the apartment looked normal on the surface. The furniture was still there, the art was on the walls. The kitchen had dishes in the cabinets, but if you opened the drawers, they were empty. If you looked in the closets, the back rows were bare. The bookshelf was just a facade of cheap paperbacks I bought at a thrift store to fill the gaps. The expensive coffee table books were gone. The imported vases were gone. I sat on my sofa that night looking around the hollow shell of my life. It was eerie. It felt like a stage set, a prop house waiting for the actors to arrive and start the play. I poured myself a glass of water in a disposable cup because I had already packed the crystal. I toasted the empty room. To the ghost I whispered. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Becky. "Hey sis, just checking in. Mom says make sure you leave the good blender. I need it for my smoothies. Also, Terrence wants to know if you have HBO. We want to watch a movie when we get there." I typed back quickly. "No problem, blender is on the counter. HBO is logged in. See you Sunday." I hit send and felt a shiver of dark satisfaction. They were so worried about blenders and movie channels. They were negotiating the terms of their comfort in a house that was already dead. They were making plans for a future that did not exist. I finished my water and crushed the cup. Tomorrow, the midnight movers would come. And by the time Becky arrived for her smoothie, there wouldn't even be a counter to put it on. I sat across from my lawyer David in his glass-walled office overlooking the city. I was not there for my will or my taxes. I was there for business. David slid a thick file across the mahogany desk. His face was grim. "You are not going to like this, Jasmine," he said. I opened the folder. The first page was a foreclosure notice. It was for my parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house Terrence was currently freeloading in while he waited to invade my apartment. I read the numbers and felt my stomach drop. $150,000. That was how much they owed, but the house was paid off 10 years ago. I remembered the party they threw when they burned the mortgage papers. How is this possible? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Did they take out a second mortgage? David nodded. A second and a third, and a home equity line of credit. Look at the dates. I scanned the documents. The dates coincided perfectly with Terrence's sudden interest in cryptocurrency 2 years ago. I remembered him bragging at Thanksgiving about going to the moon and being a crypto king. I looked at the signatures on the loan documents. Luther Vance. My father had mortgaged his entire life, his retirement, his security, all to fund his son's gambling addiction disguised as investing. And Terrence had lost it all, every cent. Now the bank was calling the note. "They are drowning," David said softly. "They have not made a payment in 6 months. The bank is moving to auction the property in 30 days. That explains why they are so desperate to move into your place. They are not just visiting Jasmine. They are practically homeless." I sat back in the leather chair. It all made sense. The aggression, the entitlement, the frantic need to secure my apartment. They were terrified. They were about to lose the roof over their heads because they bet on the wrong child. Again. And instead of telling me the truth, instead of asking for help, they decided to steal from me. "Can I buy it?" I asked, cutting through the silence. David looked confused. "Buy the house? To save them?" "No," I said, my voice cold as steel. "Not to save them. To own them. Can I buy the debt? Can I become the bank?" David smiled, a slow, shark-like smile. He tapped his pen on the desk. "Actually, yes. The bank considers this a toxic asset. They want it off their books. If you make a cash offer for the principal, they would probably take it just to avoid the legal fees of eviction, but you cannot do it as Jasmine Vance. They would know." I pulled a checkbook out of my bag. It was not my personal account. It was for a shell company I set up years ago for privacy. Phoenix Rising, LLC. "Make the offer," I said, signing my name with a flourish. "Offer them 80 cents on the dollar. Cash. Today. Use the LLC. Keep my name off everything." David took the check. "You realize what this means," he said. "If you buy this note, you hold the deed. You have the power to evict them. You have the power to put your parents on the street." I stood up and smoothed my skirt. "I know," I said, walking to the door. "They tried to take my home, David. They tried to take my peace. Now I own theirs. Call me when the papers are signed." I walked out of the office feeling lighter than air. My father thought he was the head of the household. He thought he was the king. He did not know that he was living in my house now, and the rent was past due. I stood in the center of my living room, holding a glass of tap water because I had already packed the wine glasses. The apartment was eerie. It looked lived in, but it felt dead. The art on the walls was just cheap prints I had swapped in at the last minute. The books on the shelves were dollar bin rejects. It was a hollow shell, a stage set for a play that would never have an opening night. My phone rang, cutting through the silence. It was Terrence. I let it ring twice before answering. I took a deep breath and put on my best customer service voice. "Hey, Terrence," I said, cheerful and bright. "Is everything okay for tomorrow? Yo, Jas?" Terrence said, his voice loud and demanding over the background noise of a packing tape gun. "Listen," I was thinking. "You know that TV in your office, the one on the wall? It is kinda small, right? Like maybe 40 inches. I am gonna be spending a lot of time in there, recovering from the stress of the move. I really need something bigger. Like a 65-inch, maybe an OLED. For the graphics." I closed my eyes and smiled, a sharp, jagged smile in the empty room. He was homeless. He was broke. He was about to move into his little sister's apartment for free, and he was demanding a bigger television. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive. I did not argue. I did not lecture him about gratitude or money. I just lied. "You know what, Terrence," I said, my voice dripping with fake concern. "You are absolutely right. That old TV is trash. You deserve the best. Actually, I already ordered a 65-inch Sony. It is top of the line. 4K. HDR. The works." "Really?" he asked, his voice softening with greed. "You serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "I scheduled the delivery for tomorrow afternoon, right after you guys get settled. I want you to have the best gaming setup in Atlanta." "Thanks, sis," he said, and for a second he almost sounded like a brother. "You are all right. Mom was saying you were being difficult about the whole thing, but I told her you just needed time. Glad you came to your senses." "Yeah," I said, gripping the phone tight. "I finally came to my senses. See you tomorrow at noon." I hung up and looked at the wall where the TV used to be. I had taken it down 3 hours ago. The mount was still there, a metal scar on the white paint. Tomorrow there would be no Sony delivery. There would be no gaming setup. There would be nothing but 4 walls and an echo. I walked to the kitchen and placed my key on the counter. It was the only thing left. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. Saturday. Tomorrow was Sunday, the first of the month. It was moving day. But it was also something else. It was the expiration date of my lease. I had not renewed. I had not switched to month. I had simply let it run out. Technically, at midnight, this apartment would cease to be my home. It would go back to the management company. I was not just moving out. I was legally erasing myself from the premises. When my family walked through that door tomorrow, they would not be guests. They would be trespassers, and I would be a ghost. I turned off the lights one last time and walked out into the cool night air. I did not look back. There was nothing there for me anymore, just a trap waiting to spring. I woke up at 5 a.m. on D-Day. The sun wasn't even up yet. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like holding your breath. I made coffee in a disposable cup and put on my work clothes. A crisp white blouse, black trousers, and my favorite blazer. I looked like a professional. I looked like a woman who was heading to the office for another day of meetings and blueprints. I looked normal, but nothing about today was normal. At 6:30 my phone buzzed. It was a text from Bernice. "Morning, baby. Just reminding you we are coming at noon. But listen, Terrence wants to do a little housewarming dinner tonight. 7 p.m. sharp. I am making gumbo, so have the big pot ready. And tell the doorman to let Aunt Sally in. She is bringing the cornbread. See you soon. Love, Mom." I stared at the screen. Housewarming. They were already planning parties in a house they had not even stepped foot in yet. They were inviting guests to a funeral. I typed back quickly. "Sounds great, Mom. Can't wait. See you at 7. I walked out the door at 7 a.m. exactly. I nodded to the doorman, Mr. Thompson. "Have a good day, Ms. Vance," he said, tipping his hat. "You too, Mr. Thompson," I replied. I wondered if he would still be smiling in 12 hours. I got into my car and drove around the block. I parked in the alley behind the building and waited. At 7:15, a white unmarked truck pulled into the loading dock. The midnight movers. They were early. I watched as 4 men in gray uniforms got out. They moved like ghosts, silent, efficient. One of them texted me. "We are here. Access code, please." I sent the code to the service elevator and the code to my front door. I sat in my car and watched the feed on my phone. They did not just move furniture. They erased existence. They took the sofa, the bed, the dining table. Then they started on the fixtures. They unscrewed the light bulbs. They took down the curtain rods. They removed the custom shower head I had installed and replaced it with the cheap builder-grade one I had saved in a box. They even took the toilet paper holder. By noon, the apartment was unrecognizable. It was not a home anymore. It was a white box. The floors were bare. The walls were blank. The echo was deafening. It looked exactly like it did the day I moved in 5 years ago. Bare bones. At 1 p.m., the movers texted me again. "Job done. Keys are on the counter. Good luck." I drove back to the office, but I could not focus. I kept checking the time. 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m. At 4:30, I left work. I drove to the leasing office of my building. The manager, Sarah, looked surprised to see me. "Ms. Vance," she said, "is everything okay?" I smiled. "Everything is perfect, Sarah. I am just here to turn in my keys. Today is the last day of my lease, remember?" She checked her computer. "Oh, right. But you usually renew. We assumed—" I cut her off. "Not this time. I am moving on. I did the final walkthrough with your assistant this morning. Here is the checklist. Everything is in order." I handed her the keys. The heavy brass ones. The ones my mother had fought me for. The ones Terrence had spun on his finger. They were useless now, just jagged pieces of metal that opened nothing. Sarah took them. "Okay then, you are all set. We will mail your security deposit to the forwarding address." I walked out of the office at 4:59. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry orange. I got into my car and looked up at my penthouse window one last time. It was dark, empty. The stage was set. The trap was armed, and in 2 hours my family would walk right into it. I watched the live feed on my phone like a director watching the final cut of a masterpiece. The lead mover, a guy named Mike, texted me. "Furniture is gone, Ms. Vance. Do you want us to sweep?" I typed back immediately. "No, do not sweep. But I want you to go deeper. Take the blinds. Take the curtain rods. Take the brackets out of the wall. I want holes, Mike. I want it to look like it was looted." On the screen, I saw them attack the windows. The charcoal linen drapes that Becky had complained about were ripped down in seconds. Then the heavy metal rods came down with a metallic clang that echoed even through my phone speaker. The room instantly looked bigger and colder. The sun glared in harshly without the filters highlighting the dust bunnies and the scuff marks on the floor. It looked naked, vulnerable. Then I saw Mike look up at the ceiling fixture in the dining area. He hesitated. "The bulbs too," he texted. "Yes," I replied. "Every single one. Leave them in the dark." I watched as the apartment slowly went dim. They unscrewed the smart bulbs I had programmed to mimic the sunrise. They took the vintage Edison bulbs from the pendant lights over the island. They even took the little light inside the refrigerator. When my family opened that door hoping to find leftovers, they would find nothing but darkness and the smell of stale air. "Go to the bathroom," I texted. "Take the rainfall showerhead. Put the old rusty one back on. The one that screams when you turn it on." I watched them unscrew my $500 spa fixture. Water dripped onto the tile. They screwed on the cheap plastic head the builder had installed 10 years ago. It looked pathetic. It looked like a prison shower. Good. Then came the pettiest part, the part I enjoyed the most. Check the cabinets I ordered. Take the toilet paper. Take the soap. Take the shelf liners. Leave nothing that can provide comfort. I watched them clear out the bathroom vanity. They took the extra rolls of triple-ply tissue. They took the hand towels. They took the little rubber stopper for the sink drain. If they wanted to wash their hands, they would have to do it in the dark with cold water and dry them on their pants. By the time they were finished, the apartment was not just empty. It was hostile. It was a concrete box with wires hanging from the ceiling and jagged holes in the drywall where the art used to be. It echoed. I could hear the mover's footsteps ringing out like gunshots on the bare hardwood. It was cold. It was barren. It was perfect. I authorized the final payment and closed the app. My family wanted a free ride. They wanted to occupy my space. Well, they could have the space. But they were about to find out that a house without a host is just a cage. I walked into the leasing office at 4:45 in the afternoon. The air conditioning was humming, and the smell of industrial carpet cleaner hit me. It was the smell of bureaucracy. Sarah, the building manager, looked up from her desk. Her smile faltered when she saw the look on my face. It was not my usual friendly tenant smile. It was my business face. The face I wore when I was tearing a contractor apart for using the wrong grade of steel. I placed a cashier check on her desk. It was for the lease break fee, the final cleaning fee, and the last month of utilities. I rounded up. I wanted zero debt, zero connection. Sarah picked it up and raised an eyebrow. "You are really leaving us, Jasmine?" she asked. "You have been our best tenant for 5 years. We were hoping you would reconsider." I shook my head. "No reconsideration, Sarah. It is time. I need you to print the final surrender of possession document. I want it time-stamped. I want it notarized. I want it to say in bold letters that as of 5 p.m. today, Jasmine Vance has absolutely no legal claim to Unit 4B. Sarah typed for a minute, the sound of her nails clicking on the keyboard filling the silence. The printer whirred. She slid the paper across the desk. I signed it. The ink looked black and final. She stamped it. The thud of the stamp felt like a judge's gavel. It was done. I was officially homeless. Or at least that is what the paperwork said. I took the document and walked out into the lobby. Mr. Thompson was standing at the security desk. He was a good man. He had let my mother up without calling a dozen times because he thought he was being nice. He thought families visited each other. He did not understand that in my family a visit was a raid. I walked up to the desk and placed the surrender document on the marble counter. Mr. Thompson looked at it, then up at me. "Ms. Vance," he said, confused. "What is this?" "It is a termination of residency, Mr. Thompson." I said, my voice low and serious. "Look at the time. It is 4:55. In 5 minutes I do not live here anymore. This building is not my home. That apartment is just an empty box owned by the management corporation." He nodded slowly, still looking puzzled. "Okay, Ms. Vance. But why are you telling me this?" "Because I said, leaning in closer so the delivery guy near the elevators would not hear. My family has keys, unauthorized copies. They are planning to come here tonight around 7. They think they are moving in. They think they have my permission." Mr. Thompson's eyes widened. "Oh, so you want me to tell them you moved?" "No," I said. "I want you to do your job. If anyone tries to enter Unit 4B after 5 p.m., they are not my guests." "I have no guests. They are trespassers. They are breaking into corporate property." I paused to let the weight of that sink in. "I do not want you to call me Mr. Thompson. If they try to get in, if they use those keys, if they cause a scene, do not call me. Call the police." Mr. Thompson looked at the paper again. Then he looked at the security monitors where the empty hallway of the 4th floor was displayed in grainy black and white. He straightened his uniform. He understood. This was not a family dispute anymore. This was a security breach. "Understood, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Trespassers. Police. No exceptions." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," I said. I slid my sunglasses on. I turned and walked toward the revolving doors. I did not look back at the lobby I had walked through 1,000 times. I stepped out into the humid Atlanta afternoon. The trap was set. The bait was laid. And the hunter was leaving the forest. I stood in the center of the kitchen for the last time. The granite island was cold and bare under my hand. I had wiped it down one final time, not for them, but to remove my fingerprints. I wanted no trace of me left in this box. No DNA. No scent. Nothing. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was heavy. It looked like a wedding invitation or a birth announcement. The kind of stationery Bernice loved to display on her mantel to show off to the neighbors. I placed it dead center on the island. It was the only object in the entire apartment. A white rectangle in a sea of gray shadows. I pictured my mother walking in here tonight. I pictured her greedy hands snatching it up. She would think it was a check. She would think it was a gift card to a furniture store, or a note apologizing for being such a difficult daughter. She would tear it open with her teeth, expecting money, expecting victory. But inside there was no check. There was no cash. There was a single sheet of cardstock and a heavy brass key. The key was useless. I had taken it to the garage that morning and snapped it in half with a pair of bolt cutters. The jagged metal edges sat loose in the bottom of the envelope, ready to scratch her skin when she reached in. I had written the note by hand in my best architectural script. The ink was black and permanent. "Welcome to reality," it read. "This key does not open any door in my life anymore. Not this apartment. Not my bank account. Not my heart. You wanted a free house. You got one. Enjoy the silence." I stared at the envelope for a long moment. It was not just a letter. It was a tombstone. It marked the death of the daughter they thought they could use. The Jasmine who craved their approval was gone. The Jasmine who paid their bills was gone. The woman standing here now was someone they did not know, someone they could not hurt. I turned my back on the kitchen. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor, echoing in the empty chambers of the living room. The sound was loud and hollow like a gunshot in a canyon. I walked to the front door. I did not look back at the view of the city skyline I used to love. I did not look at the spot where my drafting table used to be. I stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door shut. The latch clicked. It was a solid, final sound, like a vault closing. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the garage. I did not feel sad. I did not feel guilty. I felt weightless. I got into my car and started the engine. The leather seats were cool against my back. I drove up the ramp and out into the Atlanta evening. The sun was setting, turning the sky into a bruise of purple and gold. I turned my car away from downtown, away from the noise, away from the past. I drove toward the suburbs, toward the trees, toward the enclave. I was not just driving home, I was driving into a new life, and behind me the sun went down on the wreckage I had left for them to find. I stopped the car at the guardhouse of the enclave. The iron gates loomed over me 12 feet high and topped with spikes that looked like medieval weapons. Mr. Henderson stepped out of the booth. He did not wave me through. He stopped the car. He checked my face against the photo on his tablet. He scanned my access card. He looked in my back seat. Only then did the heavy gates groan open. It was aggressive. It was excessive. It was exactly what I needed. I drove slowly down the winding street, lined with old oak trees and mansions set far back from the road. No one was parked on the grass. No one was blasting music. There were no broken tricycles in the driveways. It was a different planet. I pulled into my garage and the door rumbled shut behind me, sealing out the world. I sat in the car for a moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. I unlocked the door to the mudroom and stepped inside. The air was cool and still. It smelled of lemon polish and fresh paint. I walked into the great room. The ceiling soared 20 feet above my head. My footsteps on the marble floor sounded like gunshots in a cathedral. I stopped in the center of the room and closed my eyes. I waited. My body was tense, every muscle coiled tight, ready for the assault. I was waiting for the crash. I was waiting for the sound of the front door being kicked open. I was waiting for my mother's shrill voice complaining about the distance from the parking lot. I was waiting for the thud of Terrence's boots on my coffee table or the whine of Becky demanding a snack. My heart hammered against my ribs. I spun around when the refrigerator hummed to life, convinced it was an intruder. I checked the locks on the French doors 3 times. But there was nothing. No noise, no smell of burnt grease, no invasion. The silence was absolute. It was so thick it felt heavy pressing against my eardrums. It was a strange, foreign sensation. I realized then that I had been living in a state of siege for so long that I did not know how to be at peace. I was a soldier standing in an empty field waiting for a battle that was happening miles away. I walked to the kitchen island, which was twice the size of the one in my old apartment. I opened a bottle of Pinot Noir. The cork popped with a soft thud that echoed in the vast emptiness. I poured a glass, watching the dark red liquid swirl. I picked up my phone. The clock read 7:05. It was time. Across the city, my family was pulling up to the curb. They were dragging their suitcases and their entitlement up the sidewalk. They were reaching for the door handle, expecting it to open. They were walking into the trap. I looked at my phone one last time. I could almost feel the vibration starting, the phantom buzz of their rage reaching out to find me. I did not want to feel it. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone and held it down. The screen went black. I set the dead phone on the marble counter and picked up my wine. I took a slow, deep sip, letting the silence wrap around me like a blanket. The storm was breaking over them now, but here in my fortress the air was perfectly still. At 7 o'clock sharp, the caravan arrived at the curb of my old building. It looked less like a family moving in, and more like a hostile takeover. My father, Luther, parked his rusted sedan directly in the loading zone, blocking a delivery truck without a second thought. Terrence pulled up behind him in a rental van he likely paid for with the last of his credit limit. They spilled out onto the sidewalk, dragging suitcases, duct-taped boxes, and trash bags filled with clothes. Aunt Sally was there too, shuffling behind them, clutching a foil-wrapped pan of cornbread just like my mother had ordered. They marched through the lobby past Mr. Thompson, who stood behind the security desk with his face like stone. They did not even glance at him. They were too busy celebrating their victory. They piled into the elevator, pressing the button for the penthouse floor with the confidence of owners. The air in the small metal box must have been thick with excitement and entitlement. Becky was already staking her claim. "I hope Jasmine actually cleaned the master bathroom this time," she whined, rubbing her stomach. "I need that soaking tub for my ankles, and if I see one bottle of her fancy shampoo on the counter, I am throwing it out. I need space for my lotions. I am taking the master suite, Terrence. You can tell Jasmine she is sleeping on the couch until she buys a new bed for the guest room." Terrence laughed, slapping the wall of the elevator. "Don't worry, babe. She knows the deal. I am just thinking about that 65-inch Sony she promised. I am going to break it in with Call of Duty all night." About time she stepped up. She finally realized who the real head of the family is. Luther nodded sagely, adjusting his hat. She just needed a firm hand, son. You have to remind these career women where they come from. She is lucky we are even willing to stay with her after how she acted. The elevator dinged and they marched down the hallway. Bernice was at the front leading the charge. She looked at the door to Unit 4B like it was the gates of heaven. She did not knock. Why would she knock on a door she believed she conquered? She reached into her oversized purse and dug around until she found it. The key. The silver copy she had made behind my back. The symbol of her control over my life. She held it up for the others to see, a smug smile plastered on her face. "See," she said. "Mother always knows best." She slid the key into the lock. She tried to turn it to the right. It did not move. It hit a solid wall of resistance. She frowned, jiggling it slightly. It was stuck. She pulled it out and jammed it back in harder this time. She twisted her wrist with force, but the cylinder remained frozen. Her smile began to falter. "What in the world?" she muttered. "This thing is sticky." Luther sighed loudly, stepping up behind her. "Move over, Bernice. You have no strength in your hands. Let a man do it." He grabbed the key from her and shoved it into the hole. He grunted, twisting it with his heavy, calloused hand. It did not budge. It did not click. It was not just a sticky lock. It was a completely different mechanism. The landlord had swapped the cylinder the moment the clock struck 5. They were standing in a hallway full of boxes holding a piece of metal that opened absolutely nothing. They were trying to unlock a door that had already been sealed shut against them, and on the other side there was no 65-inch TV. There was no pink curtain. There was only the dark. Luther slammed his phone against his leg, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "She is ignoring me," he shouted, his voice echoing in the hallway. "My own daughter is sending me to voicemail while we stand out here like beggars. She thinks she is cute. She thinks she can lock me out of a house I told her she could have." Bernice started to hyperventilate, clutching her chest. "My heart, Luther," she wheezed. "The stress. The baby needs to sit down. Call Ray. Get him up here now." Terrence pulled out his phone and dialed. Ray was a shady locksmith from the old neighborhood who did not ask questions as long as you paid cash. "Yo, Ray," Terrence barked. "We are at the penthouse. Yeah, the lock is jammed again. Bring the heavy-duty stuff. We need in now." 10 minutes later, Ray stepped off the elevator carrying a black duffel bag. He looked at the family camped out in the hallway, the suitcases, the food, the anger. He did not say a word. He just knelt in front of the door. The sound of the drill was violent. It screamed against the metal, tearing through the expensive high-security mechanism the landlord had just installed. Sparks flew, hitting the hallway carpet. The smell of burning metal mixed with the smell of cooling gumbo. "Faster," Luther yelled, standing over the man. "Break it down if you have to." With a loud crack, the deadbolt shattered. The door popped open an inch. Ray stood up, wiping metal shavings off his pants. "That will be 200, he said. Luther shoved a wad of crumpled bills at him and kicked the door wide open. They did not walk in. They surged. They rushed the entrance like a SWAT team or a pack of wolves. They were ready to claim their territory. They were ready to drop their bags on my floors and put their feet on my furniture. They were ready to consume. But the momentum stopped dead the second they crossed the threshold. They froze in a cluster, their bodies bumping into each other as they tried to process what they were seeing. Or rather, what they were not seeing. It was pitch black. The darkness was absolute heavy and suffocating. Luther reached for the light switch on the wall and flipped it furiously. Click, click, click. Nothing happened. No warm glow from the overhead recessed lighting. No soft hum from the refrigerator. The electricity had been cut hours ago. Bernice pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, shaking as her hand trembled. She swept it across the room and the light revealed a horror show. Empty. Everything was gone. The white Italian leather sofa where Terence planned to sleep was gone. The 65-inch television he had bragged about was a fantasy. The wall mount was just 4 holes in the drywall. The curtains Becky had demanded to be changed to pink were missing, leaving the windows bare and black like empty eyes staring out at the city. There was no dining table to put the gumbo on. There were no chairs to sit in. The rug was gone, leaving only the cold, hard floor. The air did not smell like home. It smelled like dust and abandonment. It was a concrete box, a cave. Becky let out a wail that sounded like a siren. "Where is the furniture?" she screamed, her voice bouncing off the bare walls. "Where is the bed? I need to sit down." Terence ran to the kitchen, sliding on the dusty floor. He yanked open the refrigerator door. It swung open into darkness. No light, no food, just warm, stagnant air. He slammed it shut and kicked the cabinet. Empty, hollow. They stood there in the center of the void, their luggage surrounding them like useless props. The house they had fought so hard to invade, the sanctuary they had felt entitled to steal, had vanished. They were standing in a graveyard. And for the first time in their lives, they were completely and utterly alone. The flashlight beam from Bernice's phone was shaking wildly, making the shadows dance on the bare walls. Becky was sitting on her suitcase, clutching her belly and wailing like a banshee. "My ankles," she sobbed. "My ankles are swelling. I cannot stand on this floor." "Where is the chair? Where is the recliner you promised me?" Bernice rushed over to her, but tripped on a loose cable hanging from where the TV used to be. She stumbled, catching herself on the wall. The wall was cold and gritty. "Luther, where are the lights?" Bernice shrieked. "Turn on the breaker. This is ridiculous. I cannot see to unpack." Luther was over by the utility panel in the hallway, fumbling with the latch. He flipped the main switch up and down. Clack, clack. Nothing. No hum. No buzz. Just the dead silence of a disconnected grid. "She cut it." He growled, his voice low and dangerous. "She cut the power. That spiteful little witch. She called the electric company and shut it off." Terence let out a roar of frustration. He spun around, looking for something to hit. His eyes landed on the drywall near the kitchen entrance. He drew back his fist and punched, hard. The sound was sickening, a crunch of plaster and wood. His hand went right through, leaving a jagged hole in the pristine white paint. He pulled his hand back, shaking it, cursing under his breath. "She played us," he yelled, kicking a pile of mail that had been left on the floor. "She played us like fools. She knew we were coming. She cleared it out. She stripped it. Look at this place. It is a shell." Bernice was shining her light around, frantically looking for something, anything that proved her daughter still existed here. She swept the beam over the kitchen island. And then she saw it. The white envelope. Sitting dead center on the granite like a taunt. She snatched it up. Her greedy fingers tore at the expensive paper. A heavy piece of metal fell out and clattered onto the stone counter. It was the brass key I had snapped in half. The jagged edge gleamed in the flashlight beam. Bernice stared at it, confused. Then she pulled out the note. She read it out loud, her voice trembling with rage. "Welcome to reality. This key does not open any door in my life anymore. Not this apartment, not my bank account, not my heart. You wanted a free house. You got one. Enjoy the silence." Silence fell over the room, broken only by Becky's sniffing. Bernice crushed the note in her fist. Her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "How dare she?" she whispered. "How dare she talk to me like this? After I birthed her. After I raised her. She thinks she can just walk away. She thinks she can leave us here in the dark." Luther snatched the broken key from the counter and hurled it across the room. It hit the window with a sharp ping. "She is not walking away," he roared. "She is running. But she cannot hide from us. I am her father. I own her. And she is going to pay for this. She is going to pay for every second of this humiliation. Find her, Terrence. Find out where she went. Now." Suddenly, a deafening siren cut through the darkness. It was a security alarm, piercing and rhythmic, triggered by the vibration of Terrence punching the wall. The sound bounced off the empty concrete surfaces, amplifying the chaos. Terrence jumped back, clutching his bleeding knuckles. Before anyone could react, the hallway outside erupted with noise. Heavy boots thudding on carpet, radios crackling with static. "Police! Put your hands where I can see them, now!" The command was shouted from the doorway. 3 officers stormed into the living room, their tactical lights slicing through the gloom, blinding the family. They moved with aggressive precision. Behind them stood Sarah, the building manager, holding a clipboard like a shield. She looked at the broken doorframe and the hole in the wall, and her face hardened. "That is them," Sarah said, pointing a shaking finger at Luther. "Those are the people who broke in. I told security to watch the cameras. They drilled the lock." Luther stepped forward, shielding his eyes from the glare of the flashlights. "Officer, this is a huge misunderstanding. I am Luther Vance. This is my daughter Jasmine Vance's apartment. We are family. We are moving in tonight. We have keys." He tried to gesture to the broken key on the floor, but the lead officer stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. "Sir, back up. I do not care who you say you are. This unit is flagged as vacant corporate property. The lease was terminated at 5 p.m. today. You are trespassing on private property, and from the looks of that door, you committed breaking and entering." Bernice let out a shrill scream. "Vacant! That is a lie. My daughter lives here. She invited us. She is just playing a sick game. Call her. Tell her to stop this nonsense." Sarah stepped into the beam of light. "No, ma'am," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to be heard over the siren. "Ms. Vance surrendered possession of this unit this afternoon. She signed the termination papers. She paid the exit fees. She explicitly stated that she has vacated the premises. As of 5 o'clock, this apartment went back to the management company. You are not guests. You are intruders." Becky tried to stand up, using her suitcase for leverage, wailing again. "I am pregnant. You cannot treat us like criminals. We are victims here. Jasmine tricked us. She told us to come. She promised us a TV." The officer shined his light on Becky, then moved the beam to the jagged hole Terrence had punched in the drywall. "It looks like you folks caused significant property damage," he said coldly. "That makes this vandalism. And since you broke into a commercial residential unit with tools, that makes it burglary." Luther's face went from purple to a sickly shade of gray. He looked at Sarah, desperate now. "Call her. Call Jasmine right now. Tell her to clear this up. She cannot do this to her father. She cannot put us in jail." Sarah shook her head slowly, clutching her clipboard tighter. "I cannot do that, sir. Ms. Vance gave specific instructions. She said that if anyone entered this unit after 5 o'clock, they were not her guests because she does not live here. She said to call the police immediately. She said she has no family at this address." The officer unclipped his handcuffs. The metallic ratchet sound was loud in the empty room. "All right, folks. The party is over. Turn around and put your hands behind your backs. You are all under arrest." The walk from the elevator to the police cruisers was the longest walk of Luther Vance's life. He was a deacon at his church. He was a man who wore suits to the grocery store. Now he was being marched through the lobby of a luxury building with his hands cuffed behind his back, while the residents whispered and pointed. The handcuffs bit into his wrists, cold and tight. Bernice was weeping loudly, praying to Jesus to strike down the officers. But the only thing that struck was the reality of the back seat of a police car. It smelled like stale sweat and disinfectant. Becky was spared the cuffs because of the baby, but the humiliation was the same. She sat in the back of a separate unit, clutching her stomach and watching her husband get shoved into a squad car like a common criminal. Terence was cursing, kicking at the window until an officer tapped on the glass with a baton and told him to sit still or face a resisting charge. At the precinct, they were processed like anyone else. Fingerprints, mugshots, the removal of belts and shoelaces. Luther stood for his photo, holding the placard with his name and booking number, his face a mask of shock and fury. They were put in a holding cell. It was a cage, a concrete box with a metal toilet in the corner and a bench that sucked the heat right out of their bones. Bernice used her one phone call immediately. She dialed Jasmine's number with trembling fingers. She was ready to scream. She was ready to demand that Jasmine get down here this instant and fix this mess. But the phone did not ring. It did not go to voicemail. It just clicked, and a robotic voice said, "The number you have dialed is not accepting calls from this number." She tried again, and again, blocked. Jasmine had cut the line. She had severed the connection before the handcuffs even went on. Luther tried next. Same result. Terence tried. Nothing. They were screaming into a void. Jasmine was gone. Panic set in. They could not stay here. They had to make bail. But they were broke. Luther's credit cards were maxed out from the crypto loans. Terence had zero assets. They had to call Aunt Sally, the woman they had dragged along to carry the cornbread, the woman they treated like a servant. She had been waiting in the lobby, terrified and confused, when the police took them away. Sally answered on the first ring. She came down to the station in a taxi. She stood at the desk opening her worn leather purse. She pulled out a stack of cash. It was her emergency fund, her life savings, money she had hidden under her mattress for 10 years. She counted it out with shaking hands to pay for the freedom of people who would not have given her a dime. They were released at 3 in the morning. The city was quiet and cold. They stood on the sidewalk outside the precinct holding their shoelaces and belts, their clothes wrinkled and smelling of the cell. They looked at each other, tired, hungry, defeated. "Where do we go?" Becky asked, her voice thin and scratchy. "We cannot go back to the penthouse." Terence looked at his shoes. He did not want to look at his father. "We cannot go back to our apartment either," he mumbled. "I turned in the keys yesterday. I told the landlord we were moving out. He already rented it to someone else." The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness. They were not just locked out. They were homeless. They had burned their bridges, and now they were standing on the edge of the cliff, with nowhere to go but down. Luther looked at his son, and then at his car parked blocks away. "Get in the car," he said, his voice dead. "We are going to my house. It is going to be tight." I sat in the dark living room of my parents' house while the cheap floral fabric of the sofa scratched against my cheek. My back was already throbbing from the broken spring digging into my spine. It was 2 in the morning and the house was finally quiet, but the silence felt heavy and suffocating. The air was thick with the smell of old frying oil and the new acrid scent of Becky's nail polish remover. They had been here for 6 hours, and it already felt like 6 years. The house was too small. It had always been small, but with just me and Bernice it was manageable. Now, with 4 adults and all their baggage, it felt like a submarine running out of oxygen. Every time someone moved, a floorboard creaked. Every time someone flushed the toilet, the pipes groaned in the walls like a dying animal. Becky and Terence had taken over the master bedroom. My bedroom. I could hear Terence snoring through the thin drywall. It was a wet, rattling sound that grated on my nerves. Becky had complained for an hour about the mattress being too firm before finally passing out. They had thrown my clothes off the dresser to make room for their things. My suits, my church shoes, my dignity, all pushed into a corner to make space for their chaos. Bernice was in the guest room, surrounded by boxes of Christmas decorations and old winter coats. She had spent the last hour before bed pacing the kitchen, muttering to herself. She was angry, not just at Jasmine, but at the world. She had lost her punching bag. Jasmine had always been the pressure valve for this family. When Bernice was mad, she yelled at Jasmine. When Terrence failed, we blamed Jasmine for not helping enough. She absorbed it all. She took the toxicity and neutralized it. But now she was gone. And the toxicity had nowhere to go. It was bouncing off the walls and hitting us. I had watched Bernice turn on Becky tonight. It was vicious. It was the same tone she used to use on Jasmine, but Becky did not know how to take it. Becky fought back, she whined, she played the victim, and that only made Bernice angrier. I shifted on the couch trying to find a position that didn't hurt. My hip bone pressed against the wooden frame. This was my life now. Sleeping on furniture I bought at a garage sale 20 years ago while my grown son slept in my bed. I thought about the penthouse, the white leather sofa, the view of the city lights. We could have had that. We could be sleeping in climate-controlled luxury right now if we had just played it smarter. If we had just waited until Sunday. But we got greedy. And now we were paying the price. I heard a noise from the kitchen, the refrigerator door opening. I lifted my head. In the dim light from the street lamp outside, I saw Terrence. He was standing in his boxers drinking milk straight from the carton. My milk. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and let out a loud belch. He didn't even close the carton before putting it back. I laid my head back down and closed my eyes. This was hell. Pure and simple. We were rats in a cage eating each other. And the worst part was, we had locked ourselves in. We had burned the only bridge that led out. And now we had to live in the ashes. I knew it was only going to get worse. The money was gone. The patience was gone. And soon the house would be gone too. I just didn't have the heart to tell them yet. It had been 5 days since the arrest, and the house was turning into a pressure cooker. The air conditioner in my parents' house was broken again, and the heat made everything worse. Becky was constantly crying about her swollen ankles, and my mother was pacing the kitchen muttering about betrayal and ungrateful children. I could not take it anymore. I needed money. I needed space. I needed Jasmine to fix this. I drove to the architecture firm downtown where Jasmine worked. I was ready to cause a scene. I was ready to march into the lobby and demand she come downstairs and write me a check for the hotel room we deserved. I rehearsed my speech in the elevator. I was going to tell her boss that she was neglecting her family. I was going to shame her into submission. I walked up to the receptionist desk, my chest puffed out. "Tell Jasmine Vance her brother is here," I demanded, leaning over the counter. "And tell her it is an emergency." The receptionist looked at me over her glasses. She did not look intimidated. She looked bored. "Ms. Vance is no longer with this firm, sir," she said calmly. "She resigned effective last Friday." I stared at her, resigned. Jasmine loved this job. She bragged about it constantly. She worked 80-hour weeks. She would not just quit. "You are lying," I snapped. "Call her office." The receptionist sighed and typed something on her keyboard. "Sir, her office is empty." She cleared out her desk. "She is gone." Security escorted her out. "If you do not leave, I will call them to escort you out too." I walked back to the car feeling the ground shift under my feet. She quit her job. The job that paid for the penthouse. The job that paid for my bail. If she did not have a job, how was she going to support us? I sat in the sweltering car and pulled out my phone. I started scrolling through my contacts. I needed to find someone who knew where she was. I found the number for Keisha, her friend from college. I hit dial. It rang once and then went to a busy signal. Blocked. I tried Marcus, her ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago. Straight to voicemail. I went to Instagram. I searched for her profile. User not found. I searched for her friends' profiles. I could not see their stories. They had all blocked me. Every single one of them. I sat there sweating in the driver's seat and I tried to think. Where would she go? What was her favorite restaurant? What gym did she go to? I racked my brain trying to come up with a single detail about my sister's life that did not involve money or what she could do for me. I realized with a jolt of cold fear that I did not know her. I did not know her favorite color. I did not know if she liked sushi or tacos. I did not know the name of a single person she hung out with on weekends. To me, she was just a resource. She was a bank account with legs. I had spent 35 years living in her shadow, taking her money, eating her food, and I did not know a single thing about the human being inside the suit. She was a ghost. She had vanished into the city, leaving no footprints because I had never bothered to look at where she was walking. Panic started to claw at my throat. If I could not find her, I could not pressure her. If I could not pressure her, we were dead. I needed professional help. I needed someone who could see things I had ignored. I drove back to the house. Everyone was asleep or pretending to be. I crept into the living room where my father was snoring on the couch. His wallet was on the coffee table next to a pile of unpaid bills. I opened it. It was thin. I pulled out his platinum credit card, the one he used for emergencies, the one that was already over the limit because of my crypto losses. I held it up to the light. Maybe there was a little room left. Maybe the bank would let one more charge slide before they cut us off completely. I slipped the card into my pocket. I was going to find a private investigator. I was going to find my sister. And when I did, I was going to make her pay for making me feel this small. It had been exactly 7 days since the police dragged us out of that luxury high-rise in handcuffs. 7 days of sleeping on a lumpy couch that smelled like mildew and regret. 7 days of listening to Becky complain about the water pressure, while Bernice screamed about how ungrateful children were, the curse of the earth. The air in my small house was stale, recycled through vents that had not been cleaned in a decade. I sat at the kitchen table staring at a bowl of cold oatmeal, trying to force myself to swallow. My stomach was a hard knot of anxiety that never loosened, no matter how much antacid I chewed. Then came the sharp rap at the front door. It was not a friendly neighborly knock. It was the heavy authoritative pound of official business. I flinched so hard I spilled coffee on the vinyl tablecloth. Bernice was in the back room arguing with Becky about laundry detergent again, so I wiped my mouth and walked to the door, my knees popping with every step. The mailman stood on the porch holding a thick white envelope. He had a scanner in his hand and a look of boredom on his face. "Luther Vance?" he asked, looking at his device, not at me. I knotted my throat too tight to speak. "Sign here," he said. "Certified mail." My heart started to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. Certified mail was never good news. It was either the IRS, the court, or a debt collector. I scribbled my name, my hand shaking so bad the signature looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. He handed me the envelope and walked away without another word, leaving me alone with the paper bomb in my hand. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The return address was in bold black letters: Phoenix Rising, LLC. I had never heard of them. It sounded like a church or a charity or maybe a hipster coffee shop. For a second, a foolish, desperate hope flared in my chest. Maybe it was good news. Maybe one of Terrence's crypto investments had finally paid off like he promised. Maybe this was a dividend check. Maybe we were saved. I tore the envelope open with clumsy fingers. There was no check inside, just a stack of crisp legal documents stapled together at the top. I unfolded the cover letter. The words swam before my eyes, blurring into a nightmare. Notice of debt acceleration and intent to foreclose. I read it again and again. The words did not change. They burned into my retinas. Dear Mr. Vance, please be advised that your mortgage debt previously held by First National Bank has been purchased by Phoenix Rising LLC. As the new lien holder, we have reviewed your payment history. You are 6 months in default. Under the terms of your original agreement, we are exercising our right to accelerate the debt. The total principal balance of $150,000 is due immediately. You have 30 days to remit payment in full. Failure to pay will result in immediate foreclosure proceedings and eviction. The room spun. I had to grab the doorknob to keep from sliding to the floor. $150,000. It was all there in black and white. The secret second mortgage, the home equity line of credit, the money I had siphoned out of the walls of this house to give to Terrence. He said it was a sure thing. He said Bitcoin was going to the moon. He said he would pay me back double in 3 months. That was 2 years ago. The money was gone. Vaporized in a digital wallet I did not even know how to access. I had been hiding the late notices from Bernice for months. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could rob Peter to pay Paul. But now Paul was at the door and he wanted everything. Phoenix Rising. Who were they? Why did they buy my debt? Banks usually just send angry letters. They do not sell your life to some shadow company that demands payment in 30 days. This felt personal. It felt aggressive. I looked down the hallway. I could hear Bernice humming a hymn as she folded towels. She thought this house was paid off. She thought we owned it free and clear. She thought we had a safety net, even if it was a small, cramped one. She did not know that we were standing on a trap door, and I had just cut the rope. If she found out, she would leave me. After 40 years, she would pack her bags and walk out. She could forgive a lot of things. She could forgive me for being hard on Jasmine. She could forgive me for spoiling Terrence. But she would never forgive me for losing her home. I folded the letter quickly, shoving it deep into the inside pocket of my cardigan. I could feel the sharp corners pressing against my ribs like a knife. I could not tell them. Not yet. I had 30 days. 30 days to find a miracle. 30 days to come up with a fortune I did not have. I walked back into the kitchen, my legs feeling like lead. Bernice walked in carrying a basket of laundry. "Who was at the door, Luther?" she asked casually. "Just a wrong address," I lied, my voice sounding thin and reedy in my own ears. "Just some junk mail." She nodded, not really listening. "Well, tell Terrence to move his car. He is blocking the driveway again. And tell him to stop buying that expensive organic milk. We are on a budget until Jasmine comes to her senses." I nodded, staring at the floor. A budget. We did not need a budget. We needed a time machine. We were not just broke. We were dead men walking. And the executioner had just sent the invitation. The heat in the kitchen was suffocating. I was staring at the foreclosure letter hidden in my pocket, burning a hole through the fabric. Terrence stomped into the room. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not ask if I had eaten. He just held out his hand, palm up. "Dad," he said, his voice loud and demanding. "I need the credit card. Becky sent me a list. We need the newborn diapers, the expensive ones with the aloe liner. And she wants to stock up on the organic goat milk formula. It is $40 a can." I did not look up. I could not look at him. I stared at the chipped formica table. "I do not have it." "Son," I whispered. Terrence scoffed. He kicked the leg of my chair. "Stop playing games, old man. Just give me the card." "I tried to use the one in your wallet, but it got declined at the gas station. You probably forgot to pay the bill again. Call the bank and authorize the charge. We have a baby coming. We need this stuff." I looked up then. I looked at the son I had ruined. The son I had bankrupted myself to please. "There is no bank to call, Terrence," I said, my voice cracking. "The card is not declined because of a late fee. It is declined because there is no money." He froze. "What are you talking about? You have your pension. You have the savings." "It is gone," I said. The words tasted like ash. "I gave it to you. For the crypto. For the investments. You lost it all, Terrence. And I lost the rest trying to save you. The savings account is empty. The checking account is overdrawn. And the house—" I stopped. Bernice had just walked into the room carrying a basket of folded sheets. She stopped dead in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, fixed on my face. "What about the house, Luther?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. I looked at my wife, the woman I had promised to protect, the woman who thought she was secure. "I mortgaged it, Bernice. I took out a loan against the deed. 3 of them, actually. I gave the money to Terrence. And now the bank is taking it back. We have 30 days to pay $150,000 or we are on the street." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a world ending. Bernice dropped the laundry basket. She did not scream. She did not yell. She just swayed. Her eyes rolled back in her head and she crumpled. She hit the linoleum floor with a heavy, sickening thud. Mom, Terrence screamed. He dropped to his knees, shaking her shoulders. Mom, wake up! Dad, what did you do to her? Becky waddled into the room, hearing the noise. When she saw Bernice on the floor, she started shrieking, clutching her belly. Is she dead? Oh my God, is she dead? Who is going to cook for us? Who is going to help with the baby? I knelt beside my wife, checking her pulse. It was there, but it was weak. She was breathing shallow, rapid breaths. She wasn't dead. She was just broken. The reality was too heavy for her to carry, so her body just shut down. We dragged her to the living room and laid her on the lumpy sofa. When she finally opened her eyes, she didn't look at me. She stared at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. We are beggars, she whispered. We are homeless beggars. Terrence sat on the floor, his head in his hands. He was rocking back and forth. No money, he muttered. No house, no formula. What are we going to do? We cannot survive like this. He looked up and his eyes were wild with desperation. There was only one name left in his mind. One person who had escaped the sinking ship. Jasmine, he said. We have to find Jasmine. She is the only one with cash. She is the only one who can pay off the bank. We have to find her dad. We have to beg if we have to. She is the only thing standing between us and the street. The phone rang at 6 a.m, cutting through the stagnant air of the house like a fire alarm. Terrence scrambled for it, knocking over an empty soda can in his haste. It was the private investigator. He had done his job. He had found her. She was not hiding in another state. She was not in Europe. She was right here in Atlanta, but she had moved up in the world. He wrote the address down on the back of a pizza box, his hand shaking with adrenaline. Vance Global Design. She had not just found a new job. She had started her own firm, and according to the investigator, she had leased a massive office space in the financial district. Terrence hung up and looked at the family gathered in the kitchen. They looked ragged. Bernice was pale. Luther looked 10 years older. But when Terrence read the address, a spark of life returned to their eyes. It was the look of predators who had just caught the scent of blood. She has her own company, Luther said slowly, standing up straighter. That means she has capital. That means she has investors. She is sitting on a gold mine while her family starves. That money belongs to us. I paid for her education. I put the roof over her head that allowed her to study. That firm is mine by rights. They began to plan their assault immediately. This was not going to be a polite visit. This was a raid. They needed a strategy that would force her hand. They needed to make a scene so big and so embarrassing that she would pay them just to make them go away. Becky stepped forward, rubbing her belly. Leave it to me, she said, a nasty smile spreading across her face. If she refuses, if she tries to call security, I will drop. I will scream. I will tell everyone that the stress she is causing her family is putting the baby in danger. I will fake a contraction so bad they will have to call an ambulance. She cannot look like a monster in front of her employees. She will cave. She has to. Bernice clapped her hands, her energy returning. That is perfect. Use the baby. Guilt is the only language Jasmine understands. We will go there right now. We will ambush her before she has her morning coffee. We are not leaving that office without a check for $150,000. They got dressed with a frantic energy. They put on their best clothes, trying to look like respectable people who had been wronged, not desperate grifters on the edge of ruin. Luther put on his Sunday suit, even though it was wrinkled. Bernice put on her church hat. They wanted to look like the victims. They piled into the car, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. They were loud. They were confident. They cracked jokes about how they were going to spend the extra money once they paid off the mortgage. Terrence drove fast, weaving through traffic, his eyes fixed on the skyline. They felt like an army marching to reclaim a stolen kingdom. They felt powerful. They had the element of surprise. They had the emotional leverage. They had the weaponized pregnancy. As they pulled up to the gleaming glass tower that housed Vance Global Design, they saw only a giant ATM waiting to be dispensed. They did not look up at the cameras tracking their license plate. They did not notice the security guards speaking into their earpieces. They thought they were walking into a sheep pen to shear the wool. They had no idea they were walking straight into the mouth of a tiger that had been waiting for them to make exactly this mistake. The lobby of the Millennium Tower was a cathedral of capitalism. It was a place of high ceilings, polished marble floors, and hushed conversations where billionaires whispered and fortunes were made in silence. Then my family walked in. They were a tornado of noise and bad manners crashing into a library. Luther marched straight to the security desk, slamming his hand on the marble counter with a violence that made the receptionist jump. He demanded to see Jasmine Vance. He screamed that he was her father and he would not be ignored. Bernice was right behind him, waving her handbag like a weapon, shouting about ungrateful children and divine justice. The young woman at the desk looked terrified. She reached for the phone, but Terrence leaned over the counter, getting in her face. "Do not you call the cops," he sneered. "You call Jasmine. Tell her we are here to take what is ours. Tell her if she does not come down right now, my wife is going to have her baby right here on this floor." Becky took her cue immediately. She let out a loud, dramatic moan, clutching her stomach and leaning heavily against a decorative pillar. Oh, the pain, she wailed, ensuring everyone in the lobby could hear. "The stress is killing me. My baby is in distress." Security guards moved in, forming a wall of black uniforms between my family and the elevators. "Sir, you need to lower your voice," the head guard said, his hand resting on his taser. "You are disturbing the tenants." Luther puffed up his chest, ready to fight. "I do not care about your tenants. I built this city. I own this building. Or at least my daughter does, and that is the same thing." Suddenly, the elevator doors at the far end of the hall slid open with a soft chime. The sound was quiet, but it cut through the shouting like a knife. Silence fell over the lobby. Steps clicked against the marble floor. Slow, rhythmic, powerful. I walked out of the elevator. I was not wearing the soft sweaters or practical jeans they were used to seeing me in. I was wearing a charcoal gray Italian suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek bun. I wore stilettos that looked like weapons. I did not look like their daughter. I looked like the CEO of a company that ate people like them for breakfast. Jasmine Bernice cried out, dropping her angry act and trying to rush toward me with open arms. "Baby, we were so worried. We just want to talk." Two guards stepped in front of her, blocking her path. She bounced off them like a bird hitting a window. I did not flinch. I did not smile. I did not look at her with love or fear. I looked at her like a bug on a windshield. "Let them through," I said. My voice was calm and low, but it carried across the cavernous room. The family smirked. They exchanged glances of triumph. They thought I had cracked. They thought the public pressure had worked. They straightened their clothes and marched past the guards' heads held high. "Follow me," I said, turning my back on them. I led them down a long corridor to the main conference room. It was a glass fishbowl visible to the entire office. I opened the door and gestured for them to enter. They walked in expecting a checkbook. Instead, they found 3 people waiting for them. My lawyer, David, the head of building security, and a court stenographer ready to record every word. I walked in last and closed the heavy glass door. The trap was set. They just did not know they were the prey. The conference room was soundproof, but inside the glass walls the air was vibrating with noise. My family did not sit down like civilized people attending a business meeting. They spread out like an infection, taking over the space with their chaos. Becky took center stage immediately. She slumped into one of the expensive leather chairs and launched into the performance she had clearly rehearsed in the car. She let out a sob that started low and ended in a high-pitched shriek that made the security guard flinch. "Jasmine," she wailed, grabbing the edge of the mahogany table with white knuckles. "Look at me. Look at your nephew. Do you have a heart of stone? We are sleeping on a floor, Jasmine. A dirty floor in a house that is falling apart. My back is breaking. The doctor said I need bed rest. He said if I keep having this much stress, I could lose the baby. She paused to look at me, waiting for a reaction. She wanted to see a crack in my armor. She wanted to see the guilt wash over my face. When I did not flinch, she dialed it up. She grabbed her belly with both hands, rocking back and forth. "You are killing him," she screamed, throwing her head back. "You are killing your own nephew before he even takes a breath. How can you be so cruel? All we need is a little help. Just a check to pay off the house. Just a place to stay. Is that too much to ask from a millionaire?" Terrence patted her back, looking at me with disgusted eyes. "See what you are doing," he spat. "You are a monster." Then it was Bernice's turn. She stood up, slamming her heavy purse onto the polished wood table. She pointed a finger at my face, a finger that used to terrify me when I was a child. Now it just looked crooked and old. "I do not know who you are anymore," she hissed. "The devil has taken your soul. I birthed you. I pushed you out into this world. I wiped your backside. I fed you when we had nothing. I sacrificed my own happiness so you could go to school. And this is how you repay me, by watching us starve, by watching your mother sleep on a lumpy couch. You are cold, Jasmine. You are a block of ice. I should have left you in the hospital. I should have walked away then and saved myself the heartbreak." She leaned over the table, her face inches from mine, screaming about duty and Bible verses and the fourth commandment. She went on for 5 minutes straight. She called me every name in the book. She cried real tears of rage. She threatened to go to the press. She prayed loudly for God to strike me down for my insolence. I sat perfectly still. I did not blink. I did not interrupt. I watched them the way a scientist watches bacteria under a microscope. I watched my lawyer David checking his watch, looking bored. I watched the stenographer typing furiously to keep up with the stream of abuse. I watched the security guard shifting his weight, ready to tackle them if they lunged. Finally, they ran out of breath. The screaming turned into heavy panting. The room fell into a heavy, awkward silence. They looked at me, chests heaving, waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the apology. They were waiting for the tears. They were waiting for the checkbook to come out. I slowly uncrossed my legs. I placed my hands flat on the table. The cool glass felt grounding under my palms. I looked at Becky, who was wiping dry tears from her cheeks. I looked at Bernice, who was trembling with self-righteous rage. I looked at Luther, who was staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "Are you finished?" I asked. My voice was soft, but it hit the walls like a hammer. They blinked, confused by my tone. They expected a fight. They did not expect calm. "Good," I said, standing up and buttoning my blazer. "Because now it is my turn to speak, and unlike you, I am only going to say this once." David stepped forward from the corner of the room. He moved with the silent lethality of a shark in a suit. He did not say a word. He simply placed a thick black leather folder in the center of the glass conference table. It hit the surface with a heavy thud that made Becky jump and silenced Bernice's muttering. Luther looked at the folder like it was a bomb. He knew what legal papers looked like. He had seen enough of them in the last week. "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Open it." My father reached out his hand, shaking visibly. He flipped open the cover. He recognized the documents immediately. It was the same foreclosure notice he had hidden in his pocket for a week. The same demand for payment. The same threat of eviction from Phoenix Rising LLC. "You are familiar with this document?" I asked. Luther nodded slowly, sweat beading on his forehead. "It is the mortgage notice," he whispered, his voice trembling. "From the new company. They bought the note from the bank. They are threatening to take the house if we do not pay the full balance in 30 days. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You are right. They are extremely aggressive. They have a zero-tolerance policy for default. And do you know why? Do you know who runs Phoenix Rising?" They looked at me blankly. Terrence scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Who cares? Some faceless suit in New York, Some hedge fund guy trying to make a quick buck. Just tell us if you are going to help us pay them or not. I stared at Terrence until he looked away. No, Terrence. It is not a suit in New York. And it is not a hedge fund. I tapped the glass table with my index finger right next to the folder. It is me. The room went so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming in the vents. It was a vacuum of silence. I am the sole proprietor of Phoenix Rising LLC, I said, letting the words hang in the air. I incorporated it 6 months ago. I named it that because I knew I would eventually have to rise from the ashes of the life you people tried to burn down. I bought your debt last week. I bought every cent of the $150,000 you stole from your own equity to fund Terrence's gambling. I own the note. I own the interest. And most importantly, I own the deed to the house you are sleeping in. Luther's face went the color of old paper. All the blood drained out of him, leaving him looking like a corpse propped up in a chair. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was doing the math in his head. He realized that the daughter he had slapped, the daughter he had bullied and dismissed, was now the only thing standing between him and the street. Terrence's jaw literally dropped. He looked from me to the papers and back again, his eyes bulging. You, he stammered. You are the bank. I nodded slowly, enjoying the look of absolute terror on their faces. I am the bank. I am the landlord, and you are currently 6 months behind on payment. You came here today demanding money from me. You came here to extort me with fake tears and a fake pregnancy scare. But you forgot one thing. You do not demand things from your creditor. You do not threaten the person who holds the keys to your survival. You beg. And right now I do not see anyone begging. I picked up the silver remote control from the table and pointed it at the wall. The massive screen behind me flickered to life, bathing the room in the harsh blue light of evidence. Look closely, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. This is not hearsay. This is a paper trail. The first image was a high-resolution scan of a document. It was the loan application for the second mortgage. There was Luther's signature, bold and undeniable. Next slide. A bank statement showing a $50,000 wire transfer to an offshore crypto exchange. Next slide. A photo from Terrence's private social media showing him posing next to a modified car with custom rims. Rims bought with the money meant for the mortgage payment. Next slide. Credit card receipts for designer maternity clothes and expensive dinners signed by Becky, but paid for by Luther. I turned to face my father, who was shrinking into his chair. You sat there and let Mom faint from the shock. You let her think this was just bad market luck. But it was not luck. You are not a victim, Dad. You are an accomplice. You signed the papers. You handed over the cash. You sold your wife's future and your own dignity just to keep enabling a son who refuses to grow up. You did not just lose the house. You gave it away piece by piece. Bernice slowly turned her head to look at the man she had been married to for 40 years. The look in her eyes was not love or anger anymore. It was pure horror. She was looking at a stranger. She realized that while she was clipping coupons and saving pennies, he was signing away her security to buy toys for their 35-year-old son. She looked at Terrence, who was trying to shrink behind his wife, and she finally saw him for the parasite he was. She looked sick. I cleared my throat, bringing the room back to me. I am not a monster, I said, my voice flat. I am not going to foreclose on you today. I am not going to throw you on the street tonight, but I am not forgiving this debt either. Here is the deal. You are going to list the house for sale tomorrow. You will sell it at market value. You will pay Phoenix Rising the full $150,000 you owe immediately after closing. Whatever money is left over is yours to keep. It won't be much, maybe $20,000 if you are lucky. It is enough for a security deposit on a small apartment for 2 people. Just 2. That is the condition. Terrence and Becky get nothing. They do not get a cut of the equity. They do not get a room in your new apartment. They are cut off completely. If I find out you gave them a single cent of the remaining money, I will sue you for the interest too. They are adults. It is time they learned how to survive without eating you alive. The second the words left my mouth, the act dropped. Becky stopped wailing. She sat up straight, and the fake tears evaporated like magic. She looked at Terence with eyes that were not sad but vicious. She did not see a husband anymore, she saw a dead weight. You lied to me, she spat, her voice venomous. You said you had crypto millions. You said your family was rich. You are just a broke loser living in your mommy's basement. She stood up, grabbing her designer purse. I am going to my mother's house. Do not follow me, Terence. My lawyer will send the divorce papers to the shelter or wherever you end up sleeping. She walked out of the glass room without looking back, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and betrayal in her wake. Terence collapsed. He looked at me, his face wet with snot and real tears this time. Jasmine, please, he sobbed, reaching for my hand across the table. You cannot let her leave. You cannot let me drown. I am your brother. We are blood. I pulled my hand away as if he were contagious. I pressed the intercom button on the table. Mr. Henderson, please escort my guests out. They are leaving now. The guard stepped forward, grabbing Terence by the arms as he wailed. It was over. The family unit had not just cracked, it had shattered into a million sharp pieces right there on my conference room floor. It took exactly 30 days for the ink to dry on the deed. The house on Elm Street where I grew up is gone. It belongs to a nice young couple now who have no idea about the war that was fought within those walls. My parents live in a one-bedroom walk-up apartment next to the highway. It is noisy and cramped. The walls are paper-thin and the carpet smells like stale smoke. There is no peace there, only the sound of sirens and the endless loop of blame. Bernice reminds Luther every morning over instant coffee that he is the architect of their ruin. She stares at the peeling wallpaper and lists his failures one by one. Luther just sits in his armchair staring at a blank wall, a king without a kingdom, broken by his own hubris. And Terence finally found a job. He is not a crypto millionaire. He is sweeping floors at the mall food court. He wears a gray jumpsuit with his name stitched on the pocket. He cleans up other people's trash because for the first time in his life, there is no one standing behind him to clean up his. I drove past the old house yesterday. I saw the bright red sold sign planted on the lawn. I waited for the sadness to hit me. I waited for the guilt to tighten my chest, but it never came. I just felt light. I felt the cool air of freedom filling my lungs. It was not my tragedy anymore. It was just a house. I put the car in gear and drove toward the horizon, finally breathing air that belonged only to me. The terrace of my new villa was bathed in the soft amber glow of the setting sun. It was a different kind of light than the one that used to filter through the blinds of my old apartment. This light felt clean. It felt earned. The air smelled of jasmine flowers from the garden and the expensive cedar wood of the fire pit. I stood by the railing looking out at the tree line where the city noise was just a distant hum. Behind me I could hear the clinking of glass and the easy rhythm of laughter. It was a sound I was not used to. Genuine laughter. Not the manic laughter of Terence when he won a bet, or the cruel laughter of my mother when she was mocking a neighbor. This was the sound of my chosen family. Keisha was there pouring vintage Chardonnay and telling a story that had everyone in stitches. David, my lawyer, was there too, trading jokes with my new operations manager. These were people who knew me, not Jasmine, the bank account, not Jasmine, the scapegoat. Just Jasmine. They were here because they wanted to be, not because they needed something. I walked back to the table where we had set up a spread of cheese and fruit. I felt light. My shoulders, which had been hunched in defense for 30 years, were finally relaxed. I reached for a grape, and that was when it happened. My phone was sitting on the edge of the teak table. It lit up. A silent vibration buzzed against the wood. I looked down. The screen was bright in the twilight. There was no name. Just a string of digits. An unknown number. The conversation around me didn't stop, but I felt the world slow down for a second. I knew who it was. It was the pattern of desperation. It was Bernice calling from a payphone or a neighbor's house trying to bypass the blocks I had put on her cell. Or maybe it was Luther trying to beg for a loan modification. Or Terence crying about his new reality. The old Jasmine would have panicked. The old Jasmine would have felt that familiar spike of cortisol, that sick twist in the gut that said, I had to fix this, I had to answer, I had to help. But I stood there staring at the glowing screen, and I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, no anger. Just a profound sense of detachment. It was like watching a fish swim behind thick glass. They were mouth-breathing and thrashing, but they could not touch me. They could not get wet. I reached out and picked up the device. It felt heavy with their history, heavy with the years of manipulation. Beside the cheese board sat a large silver ice bucket filled with melting cubes and cold water. Keisha stopped talking. She looked at me holding the phone. She saw the unknown number. Her eyes went soft with concern. Do you need to take that? She asked quietly. I looked at the phone one last time. The vibration was persistent, like a heartbeat that refused to die. I did not press decline. I did not try to block it. That would still be an engagement. That would still be a reaction. I held the phone over the silver bucket. I watched the screen flash one last time. Then I simply opened my fingers. The phone dropped. It hit the water with a heavy, satisfying splash. It sank to the bottom, nesting between the ice cubes. The light sputtered for a second, turning the water a faint blue, and then it went dark. The buzzing stopped. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I looked up at Keisha. She was grinning a wide, proud grin. I picked up my wine glass, the crystal cool and solid against my fingertips. I looked around at the faces of the people who actually loved me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet night air. Cheers to peace, I said softly. We clinked glasses. The sound rang out like a bell, signaling the end of a long, dark winter and the beginning of an endless summer. I took a sip of the wine and turned back to the sunset, leaving the phone and the past drowning in the ice. This story is a brutal reminder that shared DNA is not a license for abuse. Jasmine's journey proves that family isn't defined by blood, but by mutual respect. We often cling to toxic relationships out of guilt, believing we can buy love with generosity or fix people with patience. But you cannot purchase peace from those committed to destroying it. The ultimate act of self-love isn't just building a sanctuary, it is having the courage to lock the gate. Sometimes you must be willing to become the villain in their narrative to finally become the hero of your own life. If you believe that your mental peace is worth more than anyone's expectations, hit that subscribe button. And tell me in the comments, what is the one boundary you are terrified to set, but know you need to save yourself?